So you get your government. We get Washington. There can't be any other president but Washington to be the first. And think about how brilliant it really is. Here's a man who understood power. Right? When he was general, what did he do with his power at the end? He gave it back. He gave it back. Right? Now you have him as president. He's going to understand this as well. 2 terms, that's it. There's nothing that says he can't run again and again, but he's like, that's enough. Power goes back to the people. Power goes back to somebody else. Great example of a leader. Right? But now your factions are going to really start to debate and turn into political parties. The issue becomes Hamilton versus Jefferson. In this new government, what is Hamilton's position? Secretary of the Treasury, right? And Jefferson? Secretary of State. Secretary of State. Neither of them are elected, right? They're appointed. You're appointed by the president, but approved by the Senate. So they're there. Congress asked Hamilton, as Secretary of the Treasury, to do a report on the state of the economy. And he comes back, it's pretty bad. Our economy's pretty bad. Right? We owe to foreign nations, we owe to private citizens, and the states, some of the states are also in debt. So I would like to take all of the debt, the state debt, the national debt, assumption. I'd like to assume it all into one debt. And this causes a stir, a debate again. Men start taking sides of the issue. Wait, no. Some of the southern states had paid off their debts. We don't want a single debt because now you're making the federal government even stronger. Northern states, they like this because they haven't paid off their debts. Now the federal government's in charge of the debt. Hamilton wants a debt because it creates loyalty, right? If I borrow $100 from you, you don't want to see me lose my job because you like me to one day pay you back, all right? So this is a good thing to have a little debt. Jefferson gets involved. They had that little dinner party, Madison, Jefferson, and Hamilton, and Alexander Hamilton's all like, the sky is falling, we got to do this or the federal government will fail before we even know it. And Jefferson just calmly and coolly, his little lispy southern accent, he asked for something in return. If I give you assumption, I want the capital. Throw me a little bone here, right? We put the capital, it's in New York. They thought they'd move it to Philadelphia, but we're going to go to Virginia. Right? We put the capital in the South. Political power now starts to emerge in the South. The Virginia dynasty, Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, all Virginians. The Southerners dominate the political landscape. All the presidents we have up there up to Lincoln, most of them are Southern men. Only Southern men got reelected. Northern men, John Adams, John Quincy Adams, one-term presidents. Right? Pierce, Buchanan, Northern men, one-term presidents. Martin Van Buren, a Northern man, one-term president. Southern men got 2 terms. The South has political power now because of the capital coming down there. Right? This was very important to them. But then Hamilton does something else that really, really makes Jefferson angry. Not only does he want to assume the debt, but we have to have something to help control and regulate it. The Bank of the United States. Where in the Constitution can you have a bank? Nowhere. So again, this is a great time period. In order to settle the debt, we're both going to write an essay. Wouldn't that be great? That's how we settled our problems today. I don't like that. Write an essay. Explain it to me. Yeah, I'll get back to you on that one. They write essays. Who are they going to give their essays to? Washington. And, we eventually get a Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments. The 9th and 10th tell me that if it doesn't belong in the Constitution, it either goes back to the states or the people. And here's Jefferson's argument. He's a strict constructionist. It's not in the Constitution. You can't have a bank. States have their own banks. We don't need a federal bank. Hamilton. He goes to Article 1, creates the legislation, creates Congress. Article 1, Section 8, it says Congress can make any law they deem necessary and proper. It's both necessary and proper to have this bank. Of course, Washington really loves Hamilton. That's a son to him, right? I think Jefferson was doomed from the beginning. Right? Washington took Hamilton's side. And he took Hamilton's side. Jefferson gets angered over this, and they form a political party. What's their party? Jeffersonian Republicans. Yes, the Jeffersonian Republicans. Hamilton then forms his party, the Federalists. Right? So now you have opposing parties in America. We never were supposed to have that in the beginning. There's no provision in the Constitution for political parties. It just happens out of a dislike, a hatred for these two men of each other. Washington's farewell address, we know he warned of entangling alliances, but he also warns of political parties. Technically, he never joins a political party. He never joined the Federalists. He sided with them on many issues, but he never joins that party. We only have one ever Federalist president, and that's John Adams. John Adams' election is not easy because of political parties. The 1796 election. You've got Jefferson, the Republican, and Adams, the Federalist, and they're bickering back and forth at each other. This becomes this weird campaign of personalities all of a sudden. Adams narrowly wins. But the way the Constitution is read, you got the electoral vote, you win. Second place, Vice President. Barack Obama, Mitt Romney, right? That would be awesome. Not really. You have John Adams and Jefferson. This is a failed administration from the beginning. Your vice president is never going to support you. Your vice president has a political party that's going to control newspapers that's going to talk out against you. You're going to get yourself in a situation with the French. And you're going to go to war with the French, a quasi-war, over the XYZ affair. You want to silence the Republicans. So you allow yourself, as President of the United States, to allow your party to pass alien sedition acts. We're going to up the time period to become an American citizen, right? Because many immigrants are becoming Jeffersonian Republicans. So we got to cut their power base. And we don't want to speak out against the President of the United States. So these laws were aimed specifically to stop the Republicans. Not a good law. What amendment does this go against? Your freedom of speech. Your First Amendment. Right? Freedom of speech. This will hurt Adams in his re-election bid in 1800. Right? In the 1800 election, he's going to lose. Jefferson counters this with his Kentucky-Virginia resolutions. They never get passed, but in these resolutions he says that who made the federal government? In Jefferson's thought. The states. The states came together in a compact. Remember that word compact? An agreement. The compact theory develops now. States create the federal government. Then the states can nullify federal law. This never passes. But this is the seeds of the Civil War, right? These political parties, basically, in their anger towards each other, create the process by which eventually we go into war with each other. So like I said, the election of 1800, Jefferson called it the Second Revolution. He referred to this as a second revolution. He was going to bring back the principles of 1776. He was going to bring back what he called small government. This is classical liberalism, small government, states' rights, laissez-faire, stay out of people's affairs, stay out of the economy. That's what he's planning. He's been a strict constructionist advocate for a long time. He doesn't like the loosely interpretation of the Federalists. A lot of mudslinging in this 1800 election. They accused Jefferson of being an atheist. Maybe he is. He has his own Bible. He creates his own Bible. They accuse him of having children with his slave, Sally Hemings, which he may have done that. There's definitely Jefferson DNA in the family line. We just don't know which Jefferson. But he wins because of the 3/5 compromise. If there's no 3/5 compromise, Adams is a two-term president. Jefferson's now there. And Jefferson goes about to create the small government. Jefferson does not ride in a carriage to his inauguration. He walks. Right? He walks. He's going to make everything simple. He's going to be a man of the people. No more state dinners, more informal suppers. Right? We'll just come together and we'll have a buffet, and we'll just sit wherever we want around the White House and discuss things. Right? Nothing formal. He answers the door himself at the White House, oftentimes in slippers and a bathrobe. He's the Hugh Hefner of his time period. Right? He stops giving speeches to Congress. Remember, he talks that very, very loud, southern lift. People of the Congress, I do declare. They'd be like, what? What did he say? So he's no longer going to speak before Congress. He'll give it to a clerk to read his messages, which becomes the tradition all the way to Woodrow Wilson. Right? Shrinking government, making the president seem to be less important. Right? He's going to set out to do the things he said he was going to do. We get a peaceful transfer of power. In his inaugural address, we are all Republicans. We are all Federalists. We're basically all what? People of one nation, of America. We're all Americans, right? We might have difference of opinions, but we're all supposed to be the same. Still, there's going to be a lot of animosity, as you know, even to this day, right? But he's trying to heal wounds. He's trying to bring people back together. But foreign policy immediately changes everything for the Republicans. Right? They think they're going to be strict constructionists. Immediately they got to be loose constructionists. Napoleon wants to sell the entire Louisiana territory for roughly 15 cents an acre. Where in the Constitution can the President of the United States make a treaty to buy land? He can't. This is a dilemma for Jefferson. Jefferson goes against his own principles. He doubles the size of America overnight. The Federalists will use this against him. But unfortunately for the Federalists, what do you think Americans felt about this?
Yay. Wow.
We got more land. We got all this land. I can't be mad at Jefferson. Jefferson's popularity starts to soar. Until the British and the French keep harassing American merchant marines and sailors and impressing them into the Navy, Jefferson doesn't really know what to do here. He's willing to fight pirates in the Mediterranean, but he's not really willing to fight the British or the French. So what does he do instead? The Embargo Act. Oh, grab me. Remember the Oh, grab me cartoon?
Mm-hmm.
The Embargo Act. Who does this hurt? America. Yeah, American farmers are desperate for selling their products overseas. The small industry that's developing here as well, desperate to sell our products, and we can't do any of it. New England merchants especially, because there's trade comes in and out of Boston constantly, they're going to be hurt. Jefferson goes from high to low, low. His second term of office is miserable. Right? But they're still Jeffersonian Republicans. He gives it over to his protege, James Madison. The Virginia dynasty continues. And this time, the Bank of the United States, its charter is up for renewal, 1811. And they say, no, we're now in charge. No more bank. So the Bank of the United States goes away in 1811. And then a funny thing happens in 1812.
War of 1812.
War of 1812, yeah. That's always a no-brainer. When was the War of 1812? There's no way to finance this war, really. I mean, we're dependent upon states, and not every state is for the war. We're dependent upon raising militias, and the militias are going to be terrible in this war. We can't raise a standing army, really. We have one, sort of, but the money to finance this, we need to clear roads to transport, move our troops back and forth. There's no money to do that. Britain, basically, because they're too busy fighting the French, and then eventually beat the French, they just don't care about this war. I mean, they could have come back easily, but in the end, they're like, you know what? Maybe it's a good thing to have America out there. So they negotiate a peace of status quo, and immediately Madison, when it's all said and done, he starts to swallow some of these Republican principles, especially on the bank. Right? We get what's called the Madison Platform. He gives this annual message where he talks about maybe we should have a bank again. Maybe we should have protective tariffs. Right? Maybe we should give a pension to veterans of the war. So Congress gets to work and they create a pension bill. They're going to give money to the veterans. And then Madison realizes he's a Republican and he vetoes it. But they do pass the second bank. 1816, we get the second bank in the United States. And they do pass a protective tariff. 1816, the first protective tariff. So the Republicans are starting to change a little politically. They're starting to move a little bit away from ultra strictness and a little bit more into the era of being loose. During the War of 1812, the Federalists destroyed themselves at the Hartford Convention. Here they decided they wanted to radically change the government. One-term presidents, right? They don't want a president from the same state consecutively. They want to break up the Virginia dynasty. They want 2/3 vote if you go to war, right? Or if you're going to do an Embargo Act, a 2/3 vote. And they have the terrible, terrible timing of bringing their message to Congress when, one, the Treaty of Ghent has ended the war, and America believes it's won the war, and we find out that Andrew Jackson has wiped out the British at New Orleans. And here come these poor schmoes to deliver this message. When they start delivering the message in Congress, Madison was there. Remember, the Capitol is burnt. The Capitol building is burnt, the White House is burnt, the Library of Congress is destroyed. So they're meeting in another building. Madison is there. He hears them give the message. And the reports of the day said Madison literally laughed out loud when he heard them say these words. This humiliates the Federalists, and the Federalists eventually just fall apart and go away. There's no more Federalist Party. Madison's annual message, his platform, becomes Henry Clay's American system, right? Now we have new types of Republicans emerging. These national Republicans. Men like Henry Clay, and in the beginning, John C. Calhoun was a national Republican. The idea of this new national identity of Americans for all of America. Internal improvements, canals, roads, turnpikes. They want to build an observatory. They want to bring a national university to the United States. All at taxpayers' money. Right? These national Republicans. The old school Republicans started calling themselves Democratic Republicans, right? To differentiate themselves. It's supposed to be the era of good feelings, but it's really not an era of good feelings. They're going to get their bank back. They're going to get the second bank. They're going to get their protective tariff, but they're never going to get the federal government to create the roads and canals. The biggest canal built at the time period, upstate New York, it connects Lake Erie to the Hudson. The Erie Canal, yeah. That's going to have to be done by the states. Whenever they're building like the Lancaster Turnpike or the Cumberland Road, and they want to raise money to do that, they're always going to veto it. The states will have to do that. They always leave that in the hands of the states. But they do get the protective tariffs and the banks. Like I said, states will continue to fund their own things. We go from Madison's presidency into James Monroe's presidency, the last of the Virginia dynasty, the last of the Revolutionary War heroes. Right. Now, like I said, I might move a little fast at this point because I don't want to keep you too long, so don't forget this is being videotaped. So I'm going to move ahead here in like 2, 1. Oh no! Yes, I'm gone. Because I want to get to the age of Jackson. The age of Jackson. Things are starting to change politically in this country. A market revolution has taken place. People are able to travel easier on canals because of the inventions of steamboats. Roads are being built, so it's easier to travel by horse and by carriage. With people spreading out, the political party is having a harder time keeping itself together. How do we become a national party? Well, things like the spoil system, party patronage, right? Get people in local areas to work hard to keep certain people in power, and you throw federal jobs at them as a favor. That's how you keep people in a party spread over long distances without telephones at the time period. Right? I can't just call and talk to you and tell you what a good job you're doing. Now I'm going to give you a job. because you're thousands of miles away from me. But this age is also kind of brutal and nasty. Politics is changing. It's becoming much more personal. Andrew Jackson invents enemies for himself all the time. He makes it personal. He brought politics down to the common denominator. And it made him very popular, right? When he lost his first election in 24, corrupt bargain. Henry Clay and John Q. Adams created a corrupt bargain. Did they?
Probably not.
Probably not. You know, is it wrong to say, hey, we don't like this guy, let's team up against him? There's nothing wrong. There's nothing illegal with that. There's nothing really immoral about that. It happens all the time. And Henry Clay went on record a year earlier that he didn't like Jackson. So it's not like he was pretending to like him. And he ran against him. Plus, there's actually no proof that this actually took place. But Henry Clay becomes Secretary of State. Adams becomes president, even though Jackson won the popular vote. We're now moving to the era where we're going to count the popular vote. We're going to know what the popular vote is. We're moving towards mass democracy, universal manhood suffrage. All white men can now vote. Yay, white men. We still have a little other issues with women and free black men. You know, that's still going to be an issue. But all white men now can vote. You don't have to be a property owner anymore, which adds to the allure of Jackson, because he becomes the man of the people, right? This is when politics gets personal. I'm really going to seem or make myself look like I'm a man of the people. It's debatable if Jackson really is or not. Are they defenders of the Constitution like they claim they were? Are they people that want to tear up the Constitution? We know that Jackson, right, during this time period, campaigning becomes important. Up until Jackson, you get a man running for president, you don't campaign. That's below you. Other people campaign for you. In fact, you would always say, oh, I'm not really running for president. Right? You had to seem like you were more honorable that way. Henry Clay never really learned this lesson, that you can now go out and campaign. Jackson goes out and campaigns for himself. We get our first campaign song. Wow. That just startled us. You get the first campaign song, the Hunters of Kentucky. Jackson's not even from Kentucky, and yet that becomes his campaign song. He's the first president with a nickname. What, you remember what his nickname is?
Old Hickory.
Well, Old Hickory is his nickname. They start calling him Jackass Jackson. That's when he says the jackass is the symbol of the Democratic Party. But his nickname is Old Hickory. He's the first president born in a log cabin, right? He's the first president from Tennessee, what was considered the West at that time period, right? Not a college-educated man. He's also a general like George Washington. We're going to caucus and have national conventions. It used to be you were nominated for President of the United States by the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives would nominate you. The last time that happened was during the first, in 1824, what they called the election of the favored sons. They nominated Jackson, William Crawford of Georgia, Henry Clay of Kentucky, and John Quincy Adams of New England, the Massachusetts area. So you have all these men that are being nominated by the House. The House nominate you. By 1828, we're going to go to national conventions. And the National Convention will nominate you. That seemed more democratic than just the House doing it. And they caucused, they argued and debated over a week who would they nominate to run for President of the United States. Again, the spoil system. Jackson saw this as rotation system. When a new president comes in, he should have the right to say, I'd like to get rid of some of these old-timers and get some new blood in there. When I'm gone, the next president should do the same thing. And that stays in play for a long time until we get a president actually assassinated. James Garfield, right? That's when they realized they got to revamp the spoil system. And again, this is classical liberalism for the Democrats. Small government, more states' rights. Although, we see that Jackson too at times. Right? If there's a nullification crisis in South Carolina, we'll burn South Carolina to the ground. I'll take my vice president, John C. Calhoun, and hang him from a tree if I have to. Right? Yeah, I like it too. That'd be great. I still think that would be just an image of seeing Jackson. Doing that would have been just awesome, but it doesn't happen. A new party will emerge in opposition to Jackson, the Whigs. Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, these men start to form this opposition party. They start referring to themselves as Whigs. This goes back to an old English faction of groups and before the American Revolution, because they saw Jackson as a king, like he was trying to make himself a king. That's why he took the term Whig. Now they thought that they were the conservatives of the time period. It's always funny how conservatism, liberalism is often sometimes completely different. Classical liberalism today seems very conservative for us, whereas conservatism in this time period seems very liberal, because they believed in active government. Remember, they're always going to support the American system. The American system is very progressive, very liberal today. But in their time period, they thought this is conservative. Right? It's just the way things change over time. The election of 1840, that's that sad election for Clay. Clay should have ran in that election, right? He's constantly losing. He lost in 24 he lost the first time. He loses again in 32 because he tried to make the bank an issue. And Jackson destroyed him in 32, and then Jackson destroyed the bank. Right? The second bank goes away, so we no longer have a bank in the United States. Now 1840 rolls around, and Martin Van Buren is a terrible president. So the Whigs feel they can beat him, but they don't think they can do it with Clay. Poor Clay, founder of the party, they tell him, nah, I'm sorry, you can't run. You can't win an election. My shoe could beat Martin Van Buren in that election. Right? That's how bad it was. We have a big panic of 37 happens. Americans are starting to dislike Martin Van Buren. The Whigs decide we're going to get our own general. We're going to nominate this old man, William Henry Harrison, the shortest term president ever. And what's even sadder is the Whigs wanted to make Henry Clay vice president, and he turned it down. Because that's political suicide, vice presidentship. But then Harrison dies!
Oh my God.
Within just a few weeks of being president! And Henry Clay is like, what did I do?
It's just so unlucky.
It is just terrible, terrible mistiming on Clay's part. You get John Tyler. Remember the slogan was Tippecanoe and Tyler too. Because William Henry Harrison won the Battle of Tippecanoe in 1811. 1811 is the Battle of Tippecanoe. This is 1840. It tells you how old this guy is. He was the oldest man to be president until Ronald Reagan. Right? You know how old he was. Tyler immediately is supposed to be a Whig, but he really is not a Whig. He's really a Democrat. The only reason why he's a Whig is because he hated Jackson. And when they try to bring back a third bus, he vetoes it. Then they compromise with the fiscal corporation. Right? You don't have to have it in your state if you don't want it. He vetoes that as well. And then what happens to John Tyler in the political party? He becomes the only president that is kicked out of a political party. They kick him out of the Whig Party. So he serves the rest of his term without being in a party. Then Clay just thinks he can run in 44. He runs against James K. Polk. That goes bad too. Right? By 52, the Whigs are falling apart because of slavery. Slavery is what eventually pulls the Whigs apart. In the North, you have conscience Whigs. Many Whigs are becoming abolitionists, or at least they're thinking that you should stop the spread of slavery in the West. In the South, they're known as cotton Whigs. Many of them own slaves. So this starts to pull their party apart, and eventually the Kansas-Nebraska Act really does them in, and then the Republican Party comes about, the new Republican Party, and many of the conscience Whigs join the new Republican Party. And this is the last slide, and then we can go home. I want to hear a yay. Yay! 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 It only takes so much of you, Mr. Linhart. The Know-Nothing Party, or the American Party. It's called the Know Nothing because it was a secret. At first they were called the Secret Society, the Star Spangled Banner. And then they became the American Party. And people would ask them, what is the party about? Well, we don't know. We won't tell you. It's a secret. So they the press, the newspapers made fun of this and called them the Know Nothing Party. And that stuck. They were what we call a nativist party. They believed that they were Native Americans. And they hate immigrants. They're anti-immigrant. And they were anti-Catholic. Many of these people become elements of the Republican Party. All right? Anti-immigration. Does that sound familiar? Anti-immigration? Hey? Northern Whigs, right? Some Northern Democrats as well. And another group of people that call themselves Free Soilers during the Mexican-American War. They believe that that Western land should be free. So they start to form this Republican Party. By 59, it's fully a party. They ran, actually I don't know why I have 59, it should be 54. I got that wrong there. They run in the election of 56, knowing full well they won't win the election of 56, but they get their name out there. Now by 1860, you're going to have this guy, Lincoln. Right? Lincoln is coming. He gets famous with the Lincoln-Douglas debates. You have the House divided speech. We can't survive permanently half free, half slave, versus the free port doctrine of Douglas. I don't care if you vote slavery up. I don't care if you vote slavery down, just as long as you get to vote. Douglas wins. Lincoln becomes famous. Right? Lincoln becomes this new voice of the Republican Party. They don't want to nominate him in 1860. They actually want to nominate a guy named William Stewart instead. But Stewart had made too many enemies. So they called Lincoln Mr. Second Best. That's what they referred to him as, Mr. Second Best. And he wins the election, but he does not win a majority of the population. He only got, what, 39%. Just under 40%. Right? The majority of Americans wanted somebody else. But he won the Electoral College. The North basically voted for him, while the South was divided amongst 3 different candidates, including Douglas. And this is what's going to become the precursor to the Civil War, and then this will change politics forever, and that will be the next lesson. Politics changing after the Civil War. And with that, we can stop.